Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Heidi Horsley, and I'm here in our New York studio. And we are talking today about a very important topic: surviving terrorism, mass violence, and traumatic loss, and finding hope after these events in our lives. And it's an important topic for many, many reasons, and we have people on that are going to talk to us about their own experiences and how they've not only survived but gone on to thrive. And as we get up to the 20th anniversary of 9/11, there are a lot of questions about how people do survive and go on to find hope after terrorism, mass trauma, and traumatic events. And today we'll be talking with Maureen Basnicki, Heather Dearman, and Sallie Lynch about these things, and we will also be talking a lot about an incredible organization called Tuesday's Children and all the work that they do with people that have had terrorist attacks, mass violence, and traumatic loss, and what they've done to help them heal. So welcome to the show, Maureen, Heather, and Sallie.
Hi, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So Maureen, I think, I'll introduce you all first, and then I'll ask you a few questions. So I'll start with Maureen. Maureen Basnicki joins us from Canada. She lost her husband Ken on the morning of 9/11. He had been trapped on the 106th floor of the World Trade Center. 1 year after her husband's death, she and her children traveled to the Vatican as guests of Pope John Paul II for an opening ceremony for World Youth Day. They delivered a message of hope and peace to an audience of over 100,000. In 2004, Maureen co-founded the Canadian Coalition Against Terror, a policy, research, and advocacy group committed to developing innovative strategies in the battle against extremism and terrorism. Maureen was awarded the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal in 2012 in recognition of her efforts on terrorism, and successfully advocated for 9/11 being formally declared a National Day of Service in Canada. You've done so much more than that, but we don't even have time for it all. So welcome to the show, Maureen. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And with Maureen today is Heather Dearman, someone else that has done an incredible amount with her loss. And she lost her cousin Ashley, who was paralyzed. Well, her cousin Ashley was paralyzed in the 2012 Aurora Theater shooting. Ashley's unborn child and 6-year-old daughter Veronica did not survive this tragedy. Heather joined the 720 Memorial Foundation and helped lead fundraising efforts for a permanent memorial, which she now has. And Heather, give me the name of the memorial.
The name of it is called Essentiate.
It's beautiful. I did not want to destroy that name. Thank you.
Thank you.
Heather and her board are now focused on providing support across the nation to communities who have experienced similar tragedies. Heather also worked closely with the Aurora police officers and firefighters in her role with the City of Aurora's Civil Service Commission. Both Maureen and Heather are founding members of Tuesday's Children's Survivor Tragedy Outreach Program, which is also called STOP. And I am also honored to be a founding member of STOP. This is a program that addresses needs across communities impacted by terrorism and mass violence. Thank you, Sallie, for asking me to join that important program. That brings us, last but not least, to Sallie. Sallie Lynch and I have worked together in various capacities for nearly 20 years. And for over 20 years, Sallie has served those impacted by mass violence and terrorism. She is a senior program and development consultant at Tuesday's Children, and the principal researcher and author of Tuesday's Children Evidence-Based Long-Term Healing Model. Sallie is an integral part of the development of the Survivor Tragedy Outreach Program, which is also called STOP, that I just told you about. And she serves on the training subcommittee for Vibrant Emotional Health Crisis Emotional Care Team, which I was also honored to be a member of when she called me and said, Heidi, would you like to do this? So she's also was a founding member of the Advisory Board for Peace of Mind Afghanistan. She is the author of the book, FDNY Crisis Counseling, Innovative Responses to 9/11 Firefighters, Families, and Communities. And I worked with her on a longitudinal research study with Columbia University and the FDNY, looking at traumatic loss over time in firefighter families who have lost someone in the World Trade Center. We worked together for nearly 10 years, and Sallie has had a profound impact on my own career. So, and we are dear friends. So welcome to the show, Sallie.
Thank you. Happy to be on again, Heidi.
So I think, Maureen, we're going to start with you today, and I just wanted you to tell us a little bit about your husband.
Oh, happily. I like to say I had 20 wonderful years with Ken. I had 20 years of training, mind you. We had a up and down love affair because I was a flight attendant with Air Canada, and he was the kind of guy that let me live my own life, but worked with me to have family time with our children, which was so important to him. And as a couple and as parents, that's what he really excelled at too. He was the most amazing dad.
Wow.
And whatever sport the kids had an interest in, he made sure that he became a coach so that he could spend time with them and coach them, whether it was soccer in the summer or skiing or snowboarding in the winter, cycling, you name it. So I like to say I had a keeper, and I just miss him to death. There's just, in my mind, there's nobody like him. He was my best friend, of course. When you have a successful marriage, as we did, you know, I had a communicator and a man that worked hard but played equally hard.
He sounded like an amazing person. And like you said, he definitely sounds like he was a keeper. So thank you for sharing him with us today.
Thank you.
And Heather, bring us into your world and tell us a little bit about your cousin and her daughter.
Sure. My cousin Ashley and I come from a pretty big family. Our moms are 2 of 13 kids, so we have lots of aunts and uncles and cousins, and so me and Ashley are cousins. And she's just always been a quiet, humble person. And when the tragedy happened in 2012, it was really hard for our family, and a lot of us, you know, I'm sure it's common with a lot of people who are affected by tragedy that's so in the media. It's been a little tumultuous, but she was also paralyzed, like I said, and she has been going through a lot of stuff with rehabilitation and ups and downs of just all the medical problems, and not even to mention the loss of sweet 6-year-old Veronica, her little girl who was always running around smiling. She was happy and joyous all the time. And Ashley used to ask herself, is there something wrong with my daughter Veronica? She's so happy all the time. And so that's how we remember little Veronica every time we think of her. And I feel like Veronica inspires me that I should look at the world through those kind of eyes of a child, of being joyous and happy all the time. And anytime I feel like I have a sign from her or somebody talks about Ashley or Veronica, I always message Ashley a little note about, you know, Veronica's with us today, or, you know, reminding me that Veronica's love still lives on. So
I love that, Heather. I love that. And I know that I definitely wanted to mention that I know that Ashley was pregnant too and lost her baby. And my heart goes out to her, not only for the losses in your family, but for her medical issues now. So, and Veronica sounds like she is your guiding light for all that you do right now, which I love.
Yeah. Thank you.
So Sallie, tell us a little bit about Tuesday's Children, what you do, about the STOP program, and about really how you connected with these two wonderful guests, Maureen and Heather.
Sure. Thanks, Heidi. So as you know, Tuesday's Children started in response to September 11th. We were initially established to help the 3,051 children who lost a parent on that day and all the family members who lost a loved one. And since then, we've expanded our mission, and we began working with global victims of terrorism in 2008. We've worked with responder families who have taken a heavy toll since 9/11, and there have been many losses in that community from the rescue and recovery workers. And then we've also worked with Gold Star military families. And for the past decade, we've been working with communities impacted by mass violence. We helped found the Resiliency Center of Newtown, which was operating under our umbrella for its first few years. And we've been increasingly reaching out to communities like Heather's in Aurora to share promising practices, what we've learned, what they've learned, and just share peer support. And so that's how I got connected to these wonderful ladies. They are both just incredibly wonderful people and powerful advocates for survivors of tragedies. And they're also firm believers in peer support. So I first met Heather at a conference in Las Vegas, Leave No Victim Behind, which was highlighting, the needs and lessons learned from multiple tragedies. And Heather there was one of the speakers, and she just was a powerful speaker sharing her own story. And Maureen, I first met as part of the UN's International Day in tribute to and remembrance of victims of terrorism. And she, with the work that you just cited, has also been a powerful voice in that, in establishing 9/11 Day of Service in Canada. And she's been involved with Tuesday's Children for many years, but I had not met her until I saw her at the UN. So, like you, Heidi, you are an outspoken voice in this field. And when we had the idea of pulling together the Survivors of Tragedy Outreach Program to really just do what we'd been hearing was needed to create a network for people to share with each other and connect with each other when these tragedies happen. And just, it's still a budding operation. We haven't quite figured out what it's going to be, but we know from the network we've established that there is a need, and that we want to give, these survivors a support coalition, an opportunity to share their stories, and then we want to create with their voices a resource for community resilience.
I love this. So I know that you've been an integral part of the STOP program. Now, so the vision is that when, I know it's kind of just gotten off the ground, right? I mean, we've had a couple of meetings which have been amazing. So the vision is that when there are mass tragedies, you set up peer support programs in the communities. Is that?
The idea is that our group will convene and reach out to that community that's in need and say, we're here to support you. We may, if, the protocol has evolved over the last 2 decades, and we've even engaged communities that were impacted by traumatic loss predating 9/11, including the Rebels Project and Columbine. So, when a tragedy happens, it's a trigger point for people who've been impacted by something similar, and they want to help. So this is an opportunity for our group to bounce those ideas off each other and really provide support where it's needed. And it's an opportunity for them to cut through the chaos that these other communities are going through and say, we've been there. If you don't need us now, maybe you need us in a year's time, maybe you need us in a month's time. Here are some resources that can help. They hold survivor forums and provider forums, and we want to be a voice that they can kind of put at the table to say, not only here are some resources, but here's some hope. People like Heather, people like Maureen have been through this, and they can demonstrate that there's light at the end of the tunnel. It may, as one of our 9/11 family members just told me, it may feel like an oncoming train, but there is light at the end of the tunnel, and, we can find it together.
I love that. And with that in mind, Maureen, what has helped you find light at the end of the tunnel in your journey over the last 20 years?
Well, it is a journey, and we're all different. We're different in how we react to the grieving process. But I think most of us know that it's not just the grieving process that we're going through; it's the trauma that's attached. And again, we're different. But personally, it is my personality to be a half full person. Rather than a half empty, and rather than cocoon and meditate or or do yoga. And certainly I'm not discounting yoga and meditating and these types of therapies. They're very good, especially for people that enjoy that kind of activity. But I'm more of a active person. I'd rather go to a spin class or a cycle than sit and meditate. It's my personality. And I think what happens is we have to search out what's right for you. And it took a great deal of effort on my part. I wish there were the tools or the support groups readily available for me. They were not. And being a cross-border victim, I even had to struggle further. So it's my hope that no matter what your type of individual you are, you can find somebody that shares your approach, shall we say, and also there are many tools like seeing a psychologist, Heidi. Certainly I did that. I ended up seeing a psychiatrist because I had to take medication. I've been diagnosed with PTSD, but I am an individual that believes with the proper mental health, be it a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a therapist, and with a support system of other people, because that's really what kept me going. It took a while to find this support, but once I did, I latched onto it.
Wow.
I no longer just spoke to my hairdresser.
Well, you're making a good point, Maureen, because there's not a one-size-fits-all for people. Some people like, spin classes, some people like yoga, and like you said, the power of peer support is so important, knowing you're not alone. And I think that's what Tuesday's Children really does, is they provide peer support. They connect you with people that have had similar experiences. I know when my brother died in a car accident, he was only 17, and I didn't know anyone that had a loss at that age. And, connecting with peer support was invaluable for me. And at that time, Tuesday's Children wasn't around, so I connected with the Compassionate Friends. And, it's very powerful. And like you said, finding coping skills, which you've certainly done. So thank you. And Heather, what about you? You're not as far along in your journey as I am. So it's been 2012. So what has given you, I know that Veronica's helped you, but what, her memory and her light, what else has helped you along your journey?
Yeah, so next year it will have been 10 years, but I know just from the very beginning, I was so traumatized when I heard that Veronica didn't make it, and I felt like my heart just burst wide open, and I just, for some reason, my go-to was just being vulnerable, and whenever anyone was asking me how I was doing, or my cousin, and just being honest with my feelings. And then I noticed that people started sharing their stories back with me. And so for some reason that made me feel like more of a connection to humankind, because everyone has grief and trauma no matter in what scale. But once you share your pain and grief with someone, they end up giving it back to you. And then when I started raising money for the memorial, seeing how much of the community was supportive around me, and how that connection helped you connect with people by giving back, I think that really helped me in my post-traumatic growth up until this day, and noticing how it affected other people in the same way that had similar tragedy, and seeing what they would talk about, how they perceived how others were handling it, or how they were handling it themselves, and then connecting with those other nonprofits that were born out of mass tragedies and people who started them. And then we all started realizing a lot of the people that we know are going through the same things, and this is our best practices and this is their best practices. So I'm really excited about the STOP program, that we are going to have a bunch of people finally coming together to share their knowledge and learn from one another and help support other communities. But what I love most about Tuesday's Children is when they were thinking of the model for the STOP program, is that they're also supporting us, the caregivers, because were survivors of the tragedy who are now trying to go forward and advocate. And sometimes when another trauma or tragedy happens in the world, we're feeling vulnerable and alone, and we need to have that support ourselves so that we can help others, because we have to fill our hearts full again so we can give back.
I think that's a really good point, Heather. It's very easy to get burned out or feeling overwhelmed, or, we have our own things too. So, supporting other people and being supported is really important. And sometimes it's interesting because we're the ones that we like to get out there and be advocates and help people and support people. We sometimes have a hard time, some of us, getting support, letting people support us. And I always say, when you let someone support you, you're actually giving them a gift, so because they're healing. So looking at it that way has helped me a little bit to be able to be, okay, I need support right now. So that's been key. So Sallie, Heather brought up a lot of things about Tuesday's Children, which I love and agree with. What kinds of things have you seen that have really helped people after these public traumatic losses?
Sure. I think, what Maureen and Heather both touched on is just the power of having somebody else have their experience resonate with yours or yours with theirs. And I think that it's freeing in a way, and it has been freeing for many of our family members to meet somebody else and know they're not alone. We have an international program that was started by the 9/11 kids called Project Common Bond. And I think a lot of our international participants go into that program thinking there's a language barrier, I'm not going to make friends. And the minute they talk to somebody, the cultural differences, the circumstances don't really matter, because once they realize they have that common bond, they kind of drop the burden they've been carrying and just know that they're with somebody they trust. So I think that's been an important thing. Maintaining trust has been a huge thing for us as an organization, and really listening to the needs of our families and knowing, that their needs are going to change over time. The biggest thing we advocate for, and that we hope that the STOP program can help raise awareness for, is the need for long-term support and the need for, public education around trauma and loss, around the devastating impact of mass violence and terrorism, because, these things get media attention and it quickly fades away. And, there are even federal funding for resiliency centers and, those kind of community supports only last for 3 years, and there are so many ripple effects. What Maureen mentioned about being in Canada and feeling cut off from the rest of the community is something that a lot of people in the 9/11 community have felt, and a lot of underserved groups in communities impacted by mass violence have felt. So we want to make sure that we raise awareness for those issues.
Well, and I love your point about, look, we're there after the dust settles and everybody's gone. Because that's when the real grief work often starts. When the permanence of our situation starts, and when the reality and the shock wears off and we're there and people are gone. And so, you're there, boots on the ground, still supporting these communities after everybody's picked up and left, because as you know, grief doesn't have a beginning and ending. It transforms over time and changes over time. So thank you. So Maureen, if you had one piece of advice for somebody that had a sudden traumatic loss right now and doesn't know how they're going to survive at this point, what would you say?
Even though you feel that you're drowning, reach out for help. And that's where we all hope that the help will be there for them. In the immediate aftermath, you're so traumatized. You don't know where to turn to, where to go. You don't even know your own name. It's just unbelievable. So when the busyness dies down, and there's busyness, whether you lose somebody in a traditional manner or through a sudden traumatic loss like mass violence or terrorism, that that carries on for a short period of time, and you don't have time to take care of yourself or to grieve or to understand that you have to rebuild your new life. So my advice is always to reach out, and there's so many ways. Reach out to mental health, reach out to support groups, reach out to a friend. Just know that there are many people that do want to be there for you and that you are not alone.
Great. Thank you, Maureen. And Heather, what about you? What advice would you give someone? What piece of advice if they were struggling right now?
I would agree with Maureen. It's like you can't hold in all that grief and pain, and it feels like you want to, like you just can't let it go. But if you let it out, it feels like there's a hole opening up in you. But it's really an opening for other people to share love and to give you love that you can receive. And I would also say that your loved one would want you to do that. Your loved one would want you to connect and feel joy again. And they want you to be your happiest because they love you very much, and they're up there guiding you along the way. And maybe, when you talk to that other person and let them in, you can think to yourself that that's a hug from them.
Thank you, Heather. Sallie, do you have any last words?
Yeah, I would just agree with what both of them said. And I would say, in our experience, when people go through a traumatic loss in particular, that it's important to know that those feelings you're experiencing are valid, and that, not to be too hard on yourself. Don't listen to the stigma, because you've been through something difficult, you've been through something traumatic, and your response needs to be contextualized within that. So, something that is that horrible, it's okay to be horribly upset, and, don't feel crazy. Your response is measured with what you just went through.
Thank you, Sallie. If people want to find Tuesday's Children, how do they do that?
You can visit www.tuesdayschildren.org, and there are many ways to get involved with our mission and connect with other peers. So please visit.
Thank you, Sallie and Heather and Maureen. You are really examples that despite tragedy and adversity in life, there is hope again. I love everything the three of you are doing to build awareness and advocate for people that have had traumatic losses in their lives. And please visit Tuesday's Children. They have got so many incredible programs, and they are so hope-filled. So thank you for joining us today. I'm Dr. Heidi Horsley. If you'd like to see more shows, please go to opentohope.com. And if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you found your own. God bless.
In the aftermath of 9/11, many organizations came to the fore to help all those touched by the devastation. Tuesday's Children rose among them to help the many kids who lost a parent that day. Today, Tuesday's Children keeps its promise to support those impacted by 9/11. Yet there are others that need our help. Military families who've lost loved ones to the wages of war. Communities recovering from domestic tragedies and acts of violence. TuesdaysChildren.org. Healing for today and tomorrow.